Welcome to the Boston Bros Political Podcast. I am Jim Campanini, and my co-host is Peter Lucas, the famous political columnist for the Boston Herald. How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing fine, Jim.
This podcast is coming to you from the InsideLowell studios, which is brought to you by, InsideLowell Studios, by WellPoint. WellPoint, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. You know, I could have done a better job at that, but the people at WellPoint are understanding. I got my coffee here.
They better be. They better be. We're not doing another take.
You know, with all this stuff going on, okay, so I play golf, 3 times a week, my club. And I went out to breakfast with my pastor from the Immaculate Conception, the great Father Sinella, Nick Sinella. You know, a lot of people are talking about, they're not talking about so much about Trump and all the stuff that's going on, legal immigration, the Democrats. They're talking about the rising health care costs and all these people who are losing their jobs, around the state. And it's like, it's not a crisis, yet it is a crisis. The governor's not referring to it. The legislature's not referring to it. Hospitals are closing. People are losing their jobs. And the main thing they brought up was they were talking about friends who had issues and couldn't get in to see doctors. But I don't want to belabor the problem, but it is a crisis. We do have a healthcare crisis in Massachusetts, and no one's really doing anything about it. I mean...
Well, the governor has commented on it several times. It's one of the things she's talked about. But she's blaming Trump for cutting funds. But
it has nothing to do with the funds. I mean, these things were systemic in the system. I mean, you had Stewart Health going out of business, other healthcare providers going out of business. Seems like the CEOs and the executives are getting away with murder because literally and figuratively because they're making all their millions and no one's clawing back any of their money. I just saw that Stewart now is filed papers in the bankruptcy court to claw back money that they paid the vendors who hadn't received funding in several years, because they got a list of top tier creditors who should get that money before these rank and file vendors, who were providing, linens and sheets to the hospitals and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a crazy system that we've developed here in Massachusetts.
And it's gotten more crazy and more complicated as time goes by.
Yeah.
And it's getting much more difficult to see local doctors anymore because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. So, you know what? The Democrats want an issue. Why don't they make health care an issue, especially in this state? But it doesn't seem like they care about it anymore. They just want to put more money into funding Trump and the shelters for illegal immigration. I just don't understand it. But that being said, let's move on. Big story of the week was the passing of Pope Francis at 88 years old in Rome. And Peter, do you have any good stories? I mean, the Pope.
It reminds me of a story when I was in the U.S. Army as a young man stationed in southern Germany during the Cold War.
Now, when was this exactly? Because you are still young.
1955.
I was 3 years old.
A long time ago. At any rate, we were on the Czech border, and the Russians were on the other side, and our job was to keep an eye on them, and their job was to keep an eye on us. But at any rate, I took a furlough, and I decided to go to Italy. I wanted to see the battle sites of World War II, which was only ended 9 years earlier.
Were you in uniform?
Oh, no, we're in civilian clothes.
Okay. Yeah.
I went down to Anzio and Salerno and Naples and ended up in Rome with a friend of mine, another fellow GI. We wanted to see the Pope, wanted to see the Vatican. And so we went. And back then, before international flights, everybody had to go to Europe by ship. So there weren't many tourists there, and Europe was still a mess from the war. And so we were able to get into the Vatican, just walk in, walk out, no security, no guards, go to the Sistine Chapel, see Michelangelo's famous paintings on the ceiling. And we ended up out in the Vatican Square waiting to see the Pope by the Basilica, the famous Basilica. And
Were there a lot of people in the square at the time?
hardly, very few. Very few, not like it is now, no way. And but we were standing there waiting to see the Pope. I mean, you're in Rome, you got to see the Pope.
And who was this? The Pope? Which Pope was it?
Pius.
Pope Pius.
You know, later accused of being a Nazi sympathizer, but that's another story. So we're waiting to see the Pope. So this Italian guy comes by. He's about, I don't know, 30, 35 years old, unshaven, got an old double-breasted suit. He looked down and out. So he walked up to us and he said, "Hey, Americani." I said, "Yeah, si, we're Americans." He says, "You want to buy a rosary bead?" He opened up his jacket and he had rosary beads pinned to his jacket. And we said, no, we don't want any rosary beads. And then he looked around, the little furtive look in his face. He said, "How about a gun?" And he opened up his other side of his jacket and he had 3 or 4 small Berettas pinned inside his jacket.
Wow.
So my buddy says, yeah, I'll buy it. Right, how much? I don't know, $15. No, too much. $10. Okay, $10. So I give him $10 and he gives him the Beretta, and my buddy looks at it and says, "What about the bullets? What about the clip?" He said, "Bullets, $5 extra." He gave him
The Italians know how to operate.
He gave him another $5 and he gave him a clip, puts it in, he puts the Beretta in his whole waistband, and we're just standing there and then waiting for the Pope. And then the Pope came out and blessed everybody.
It was a blessed thing. Could you imagine? No security or anything?
Nothing.
Checking the crowd? Or
Nothing.
and the guy was selling guns in the square. Oh, my God. What a story.
But
What a story.
the church ain't what it used to be.
Yeah, I know. Well, I remember in 2004, I went with my wife, Mary Lee. We went to the square, and we had applied for tickets in advance. At that time I was still living in Winthrop with Mary Lee, who was a flight attendant for TWA, and went through my parish priest. Told him I was going to be in Rome. He said, "Oh, I'll get you tickets," and it was Pope John Paul at the time, and we got the tickets. So we actually had a seat, like in the square, and so we showed up about an hour before. They said be an hour before, and there were already like 10,000 people in the square, and it was a 90-degree day. And they were selling water for some outrageous price. Back then, they still had lira. So, you had to carry a stash of lira, 100,000 lira for a bottle of water. And I looked at my wife and she looked at me, said, "Jim," she says, "we'll probably be caught in that crowd," she says, "and in our seats." She says, say, we have to go to the bathroom. And so anyway, we did see the Pope, but we didn't go in and take our seats because I still have the tickets. But we did see the Pope come out and everything. And we did move on, but it was a blistering hot day, and she was probably right, not to sit in the sun. I hope I hope the good Lord didn't hold it against me that I didn't take the seats, but I still figured that I got some indulgences that day, because just standing out there in the heat and waiting for the Pope to
You didn't
come
get a gun, though.
No, I didn't get a gun, and I wasn't looking for one. And but that's my Pope story. But one of the things about after the Pope, it was announced that the Pope had died. I went through the different news channels to see how they covered it, like the photos, and I remember watching on Saturday. The news. The Pope came out in his Pope mobile, and I said to and I said to my wife, I said, "Wow, he doesn't look good." He was trying to make the sign of the cross and bless people, and then the next day I woke up and he died. I says, "Wow, that was something." But the news coverage, oh man. once Trump announced that he would be going to the funeral in Rome, I mean, I turned on Sky News, the international station. I said, let me see how they're portraying the Pope, because they had a lot of photos.
How did they portray it?
Well, right away, the lead story was Trump was going to, and it was a stand-up reporter, okay, in Rome, and she said. She actually attacked Donald Trump for coming because she says, "Oh, and the president has announced that he'd be coming. Here's a president who was on the opposite side of everything that Pope Francis stood for, from immigration to climate." I'm saying, wait a minute, it's just a stand-up report about Trump and his wife, Melania, representing the United States, and they'll be coming to Rome. And they turned it into a political statement.
Maybe Trump should have gone to El Salvador to visit Garcia,
like
everybody else.
Yeah, you wonder how that would have been treated. But I says, the guy can't get a break. He can't win anywhere. And then it's just amazing how he gets perceived from some of these people. I mean, he's going as a representative of the United States of America. I mean, like dignitaries from other countries. Were they going to say the same thing if a dictator decides to show up? What if Vladimir Putin decides to show up? They're going to say the same thing about him? Is he persona non grata? I mean,
no, they'll be praising him for coming.
yeah. So I don't know. And CNN and MSNBC, they all give their snarky remarks about it, and it's just well. Look at MSNBC this week. We get the report that came out. Well, Jennifer Psaki, the former press secretary for Joe Biden, she actually admitted that, hey, the people who watch NBC, they want news, and it's not positive news. They don't watch our station for positive news about Donald Trump. You're not going to get it here. We report negative news, or at least put that bent on it. This is the only time I think she's been honest in the last 5 years.
Well, she certainly never said anything about the president's dementia when she worked for him.
No, I know. And so she just came on right. Now, MSNBC is trying to revamp, but they fired a lot of people. They're trying to become a little more, I don't know.
Mainstream?
Yeah, if you can even say that, or at least be a little more in the middle. It'll never happen. And Psaki to come out and say that right on basically he's telling, half of America, if not more, don't even bother watching us, because we're never going to say anything positive about President Trump or his administration. Even if the sun is out, the stock market goes up to $50,000,
Doesn't matter.
50,000 points, it's not going to happen.
It's not journalism anymore. It's just propaganda.
Yeah.
It's not journalism.
Yeah,
Journalism is dead.
Well,
The way you and I used to know it, the way we were brought up in the business, that is all gone. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I'm reading a biography on the Jimmy Breslin, okay, and
I knew Breslin. I got that book. I haven't read it yet, but I've got that book.
So I think when you, because I was going to, so you do have it. Okay, so I'm halfway through it, and I think when we both finish the book, okay, we got to talk about that and Tom Wolfe era, the new journalism, the Herald Tribune that he worked for, which at the time was the glory days of New York City journalism. You had the Post, the New York Daily News, the New York Times. Then you had Newsday come in, but
Jim, when I started in Boston as a reporter, there were 7 newspapers.
Yeah, and and they were all fighting for the truth, or the semblance of the truth of the story, and the people were informed. But anyway, that's a whole different subject about journalism and everything else. We'll have to get into, because those guys wore out dozens of pair of shoes in the course of a year, going around and talking to people. They didn't sit in their office, work the phones, and didn't. And when you don't talk to someone face to face, okay, or don't even know them, and just call up them cold and say, oh, you're a journalism professor at this liberal college. What do you think about Trump's with tariffs? I mean, you don't even know who you're really talking to on the other end. But these guys wore out their shoes. They drank coffee 24 hours a day, meeting people at different places, and they got a sense of what was going on.
Yeah, well, that's gone now. When I taught briefly school journalism class at BU and for a while, and some budding reporters, would-be reporters, would ask me, for advice. How do I act as a reporter and so on? What do you do? And I say, well, there's 3 things you got to do. Always be the first one to arrive and the last one to leave. Carry 2 pens in case one doesn't work, and walk like a golfer.
Walk like a golfer.
Sure. You see these golfers coming down the 18th fairway with a 3-stroke lead. The sun is out. The people are cheering. There's a beautiful blonde waiting for you at the end and a purse of $2 million. That's how you got to walk.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe it at the time, but this is my last thing with Pleasant, and then we'll move on. But in 1964, which was a big year, I just got done with the Son of Sam stories. Remember the serial killer in New York killed 5 women and the guy actually wrote a letter to Breslin.
That's right.
And he was a columnist. The guy was still on the run. They didn't even know who it was, Sam Berkowitz. He was making. They paid him $125,000 a year. He was making because that in those days there was circulation wars and Breslin's column. He wrote like you 3 times a week, and then a longer piece on Sunday.
Yep.
It was amazing, $125,000, and the guy who writes the book, Richard Esposito, basically he was making $125,000 a year, which is probably like $1 million in today's money. And he says he couldn't pay a bill. He never paid a bill. His wife was always hounding him. They're going to throw us out of our tenement. He lived in a tenement and stuff, But great story. That's when they were giants of it. One last thing. Peter, the favorite in this year's Kentucky Derby, which is going to be in not this Saturday, the following Saturday, next week, is a horse named Journalism.
No kidding.
Yeah. Journalism is dead.
Yeah, he'll come in last.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. We'll have to follow up on that.
I'll put a bet on that. That's interesting.
Yeah, journalism. So anyway. All right, so what else do we have? What else is on the docket here? Oh, Joe Biden stepped out of the from behind the curtains this past week. You wrote a column about it.
Well, it's too bad. He couldn't even produce a decent farewell. He sort of like walked out of the back door of the White House, so to speak, and no final stirring speech. And I had in mind, and I wrote about when General Douglas MacArthur retired from the military during the Korean War when Harry Truman fired him. And his great line was, which I quoted in the column, it went like, MacArthur, to a joint session of Congress. And he said, and like the old soldier of that ballad, I closed my military career and just fade away. An old soldier who tried to do his duty as God gave him the light to see that duty. Goodbye. That's what Joe should have done, something like that. But instead, going out trying to make money, giving speeches that he can't even put together in a coherent fashion, like the speech he gave to the disabled community representatives. It was just sad to watch him go out that way.
And it's not even a good look. I mean, he's the president; he deserves respect. But does he need the money? I mean, he got paid $300,000 for that, and like you said, the mainstream media didn't give it a whole lot of
in that column.
publicity.
I pointed out that Joe Biden, between Social Security, which he attacked, and 2 pensions from the government, one from the Senate and one from the presidency. He gets a pension of $400,000 a year.
Yeah. And
still got to go out and give speeches.
well, my point is, does he need the money? He get $300,000? No, he really doesn't need the money. Why did he do it? I mean, he wasn't even lucid in some points of the speech. But here's the thing: the mainstream media didn't cover it, even though they were fawning over him for 4 years, trying to get an interview with him. This would have been a time to really talk to him and find out what was really going on. But they didn't, because they all made a mistake, and they don't want to own up to it. But here's the other thing. The conservative press could have gone there and really pointed fingers at him. But, I don't think they're as mean-spirited as the mainstream media. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
They're basically saying, hey, okay, the guy wants to do this, let him do it, but we're going to get on and cover the real issues. They leave the guy alone, unlike what's happening with
There's some compassion from conservatives that you don't get from the left-wing. There's so much hate in the country against Trump that it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you say a kind word about Trump and people want to beat you up.
I know. It's really unfortunate. So what do you think about this? Is Harvard really fighting back against the Trump administration? Do they not want the billions millions of dollars? What was it? 15? No, is it 15 or $10 billion?
They're withholding $2 billion right now.
$2 billion right now.
But potentially $9 billion. They can withhold.
What is the end game here? They think that other colleges are going to join in. Are only going to hurt themselves. Trump doesn't have to give them, I guess, any money if he doesn't want.
Harvard supporters, the governor included, are confusing the issue. Over the weekend, Maura Healey was on several national news programs and asked about Harvard, and never once brought up that the issue was anti-Semitism at Harvard. Exactly. Anti-Semitism. And they're trying to...
Which continues.
But the defenders of Harvard are trying to make it freedom of speech, which is not that. It's anti-Semitism at Harvard and these other colleges.
But notice how these... Governor Healey and the Dems and the elitist institutions, they must be getting the same messaging from the people who ran the last Democratic election, because they're trying to turn it into an economic issue, a First Amendment issue, and then science issue. Like, we're going to lose all this research funding, and America's going to go stagnant. People are going to lose their jobs, and they're sitting on a $52 billion endowment. I mean, they could fund that institution for a long time, or maybe cut back. But I don't see it that way. I don't know of one person who's lost their job, in government, or related people. No one in my neighborhood has lost their job, their pension check, their Social Security.
Why does the taxpayer give money to Harvard?
Yeah.
Why does Harvard need taxpayer money? You said $52 billion in hand. That's what they have in their endowment. It's incredible.
Yeah, and if you're a company who is aligned with Harvard and helping them out to do research for your company and technology and innovation, I would think that would still go on. Why does Harvard need all this money from the federal government to do their job? And the other thing that comes down to, the Trump administration requested documents on what they've done with their, anti-Semitism procedures. And now, Harvard doesn't even want to give those that that information to the government. Okay, they could probably fight the lists of students who have been disciplined, because that's what also the Trump administration has asked for. Students, pro-Palestinian supporters who've raised chaos on campus. Trump wanted the list of some of these students who were disciplined, and Harvard has refused to give that up. And they're making that an issue. But give them the anti-Semitism protocol. What are you doing to protect the Jewish students on campus? You know, why are they withholding that?
You know, it's beyond me. I think they're digging themselves in the hole. I don't think Harvard can win this case. I really don't.
Yeah, and how about that private college, Hillsdale College? They've got it in their DNA. They basically said, we're not going to accept any federal funding for any reason whatsoever. And they've got a huge endowment. Okay, it's considered a conservative college, conservative because they have certain values, and they inculcate these things that saying, hey, we're going to be fair to everybody, equality across the board, but no affirmative action. Anybody who wants to come in would be considered for admission. And they don't accept any funding because they try to stay out of politics.
If a college like Hillsdale can do it and survive and excel, there's no reason why the other colleges can't do the same thing.
Yeah, maybe Harvard should do something different.
That would be drastic.
Yeah,
to get off the federal payroll.
Yeah. So,
and in fact, Elizabeth Warren, she's still on the payroll.
Yeah, no one's ever written anything about that. You think the Globe would follow how many classes she's been teaching and what? But did she go down to Louisiana with Senator 𝐓𝐡𝐞 to see? The Turkish?
No, she's saving herself for El Salvador.
Yeah. Now, it was interesting to find out that Senator 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and the others who went down to Louisiana, and then was it the Maryland senator?
Van Hollen.
He went down to El Salvador. They've been paying for these trips out of their campaign funds, and they made a big deal about it, that we paid for these trips out of our campaigns. How many more trips you think they're going to make?
It reminds me. Can I tell another story?
Yes.
I've been to El Salvador. I went down to El Salvador with Jesse Jackson when he was running for president. We went down there, Mexico, Panama, Guatemala, Honduras, Cuba twice, and El Salvador. But anyway, it reminded me of Holland, who went down to free Garcia in El Salvador and came home empty-handed. The thing about Jesse Jackson was, when we went to Cuba, one of his goals was to free American prisoners who were held in Cuban jail. And he succeeded. He brought 20 of them home on the plane that we were used to coming back to Washington from Havana. 20. And unfortunately, when we got to Washington, the FBI surrounded the plane and arrested them all. They were all drug dealers.
Oh.
But it just showed you he could bring prisoners back, but Van Hollen could not. So
yeah. It seems like Castro's Mariel boat lift. Remember, everybody who wanted to leave Cuba, there were everybody from the insane asylums and the prisons. He dumped everybody who he didn't want on America, and hey, the things is just continuing. So well. You have something on your list here about the GOP gubernatorial candidate, Mike Keneally. What's that all about?
Well, he's the only Republican announced candidate for governor. There may be more, but
in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, he's the only one so far. And it looks like a tough road to hoe because of the Trump factor. The Republicans in Massachusetts, candidates anyway, don't know how to handle Trump being president and doing what he's doing. And so he's sort of like both sides on Donald Trump. He didn't vote for him and doesn't support him, but he's pleased that the border is shut down and the immigration problem has become under control. So trying to have it both ways, I don't think it's going to work, but Who knows?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, this state wants to always seem to vote for a Republican for governor who has democratic tendencies, you know, or as moderate as some middle of the road Democrats. That's how Charlie Baker.
Bill Weld
Was
before him.
elected. Bill Weld before him, and I don't know. I can't see the future bright for any Republican who adheres to Trump principles, even though it would be a great shakeup call, because I think someone who did run a full-fledged Trump campaign in Massachusetts could probably break the 40% barrier, you know, just as a protest vote. I think at the way that some of the things that have transpired since COVID in this state, you know, post-COVID, the swelling, increasing budget, the issues that go unresolved, and we just want more money, keep finding, you know, the millionaires tax. They're talking about other taxes. Taxing candy. It's just crazy. The way we just resolve problems is try to throw more money at the issue, you know, instead of practically looking at it and maybe cutting back a little, you know.
Well, the problem with the Republican candidates, they have to decide whether they support Trump or they don't. If they don't support Trump, they have no chance of winning. If they do support Trump, there's a slim chance they could win. And but that hasn't happened so far.
Yeah. Could you imagine a Trump visit to Massachusetts? Campaigning for a candidate and
Well, he stayed away from the 250th anniversary celebration in Lexington and Concord.
Yeah.
It was probably wise to do that.
But you know what? Even that seemed a little subdued, didn't it?
It was subdued. Without the president, of course, it's going to be subdued.
I mean, it didn't even get much national play. I mean, the 250th anniversary of liberty, freedom, and Lexington Concord.
Look at,
you know what? But,
Jim, among these leftists, Markey and that whole crowd, Warren, there's nothing to celebrate. This is a miserable country. And there's nothing good about this country, in their opinion. That's what they camp on. Yeah. They campaign on fear, smear, gloom, and doom.
Well, my wife made a good point. We were watching it on the local news, and they did the best they could. But you know, even in the national press, it was you know, put on the back pages or inside. And she said to me, she says, "Jim, I wonder if they even teach it in school anymore. The shot heard round the world." She says it's probably a footnote, you know, and Lexington Concord, what was about, what you know, the British, and she says they probably don't even teach it anymore, or at least drill down to it what it meant, you know, and Paul Revere's ride, and everybody making jokes about it, the late night comics on TV, like it's a big joke, you know, and God forbid you take away the freedom and the values of what America stands for. They always want to focus on the negatives instead of the positives. You know, we are the wealthiest nation in the world. Okay, we're the most innovative nation in the world, and we're the most freedom-loving nation in the world. And God forbid that we lose that in the heritage the proud heritage that we have.
Yeah. Boy, that's terrific. Why don't you announce your candidacy, Jim?
I don't think I'd get a vote.
No.
Not in, I mean, Massachusetts would be tough for someone who sticks up for America. For someone who wears a hat like that, like you
like that.
the American flag.
Yeah,
you know,
well.
it would be difficult. But and you know what? It's a really good state. I don't know if it's a great state anymore, Massachusetts. We got problems all over the place, and this it's, you know, we should have a better commuter rail system in this state. How long has that been going on? But you know, that's for another day.
One of the things that could help is to get young people involved in public service. I wouldn't be opposed to bringing back a draft to have people serve in the military for a couple of years, or at least provide national public service for a couple of years to learn what it means to help your country, defend your country, and keep it open and free as it is. Because right now, the young people have no skin in the game. Everything has been made too easy for them, and made easier and easier by left-wing governments like we have in Massachusetts. Legalize marijuana, legalize gambling. What else is there to legalize?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what transpires in the prosecution of these people who have been arrested for damaging Tesla dealerships in this state, Tesla cars, and even charging stations. I'm waiting for these court appearances to see if they do get prosecuted, or they'll cut a deal with the state attorney general's office, Andrea Campbell, because a case that came up this week. In Minnesota, did you see that? Where this he's being classified as a Tesla thug. He actually worked for Governor Tim Wells. He was a Minnesota state employee. His name is Dylan Bryan Adams. What is it with Dylan? I mean, these leftists who are named Dylan and stuff. Is that supposed to be after? They were named after Bob Dylan or something? I don't know, but
not Dylan Thomas, the poet. That's for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, he was out walking his dog, and as he walked, every Tesla he came across, he keyed the Tesla put in a slogan, anti-Musk or Tesla slogan. He just keyed it right into the car and stuff. And the guy works for Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz. Well, he's an employee of the state. But how dumb could he be that, all the stories that have been printed about these felons who are damaging Teslas and dealerships, don't they understand that there's surveillance cameras on these cars, and there's surveillance cameras in the, on poles in the streets, and he didn't realize it, but the police tracked him right down off the video, okay, and got him cold, all right, and then he goes into he goes to the police station, and they want to charge him with felony crimes because the damage he committed was over $20,000.
Right.
And the woke DA of Hennepin County, Minnesota, Mary Moriarty, she basically fails to prosecute him. She
let him
reverses everything.
She let him walk.
She let him out and basically said that she's got a diversionary program where what would it serve society to prosecute him, put him into jail, a young man who works for the state of Minnesota doing public servant work, okay? Aren't these cars of these people that he damaged, aren't they Minnesota residents too, tax-paying citizens?
This guy should be lucky the federal government has not charged him with anything. That's a different story. With Pam Bondi is, proposing 20-year sentences for people who involved in destroying, damaging Teslas.
So he gets away scot-free. The police chief, the local police chief, is livid because he says, hey, wait a minute. We should be commended. We followed up on this. We tracked them down. We had the surveillance cameras. We expended time and resources to arrest this guy, to investigate. And she just lets him walk right out of court, saying she's going to put him in an anger management class. Who do you think's teaching the anger management class in Minnesota?
The governor.
Yeah, and Tim Walz, and they're probably going to give him a parade or something, And then she said, "Oh, he's also going to pay restitution." Yeah, you know what that settlement's going to be? $1 a year, okay, until they should garnish his salary.
But by the same token, Jim, the federal government have arrested and charged that 19-year-old BU student from wherever for torching Teslas in that case where they torched about 3 or 4.
Yes, there was
And she faces 20 years in prison.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
It's a federal charge. This was a state charge.
Yeah, yeah. So the other thing is, I just want to say, so this came from the New York Post because they dug down. They wanted to find out more about this story. Okay, so Moriarty, the DA, they elect their DAs. Same thing as we do here in Massachusetts. Well, she was backed by George Soros.
Naturally.
Okay. Who gave tens of thousands of dollars to her campaign through, they set up these PACs and everything else. And then the New York Post, in an editorial condemning her action, wrote, this is nothing new for this DA. This comes right from the New York Post. She's offered sweetheart deals to violent thugs, like probation for a killer who murdered a man whose car he was trying to steal. She gave a wrist slap for two monstrous young killers who acted as hitmen in the slaying of Zariah McKeever on the orders of her jealous ex. The last move was so obscene it prompted Waltz, no slouch in the crime coddling department, to boot pro-murder Mary from the case. He actually took her off the case after she was going to just release these hitmen. And then the last one, she tossed the case of a 35-year-old man charged with raping a 14-year-old girl and gave another sweetheart probation offer to a dealer who knowingly sold a client a fatal fentanyl hotshot.
Wow,
I mean, this is the DA.
She should come from Massachusetts. She should come to Massachusetts and run for Attorney General.
But shame on the people of Hennepin County who elected her. So
look, it's a state that elected Tampon Tim as governor. So what do you expect?
Yeah. So it's unbelievable that black has become white and white has become black in America. We're trying to teach our kids the lessons of the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, and it's just blurred all across the nation in some of these with some of these woke DAs and woke politicians. It's absolutely crazy, and I mean, we've got our own issues in this state, but that is bad. That is bad. And Dylan Bryan Adams, I haven't seen any story of him showing any remorse. He should be able to go before a judge and say that he's sorry for what he did, but he won't. He won't even get his. He won't even say he's sorry to these people whose cars he damaged. Neighbors in his own neighborhood.
It's terrible. It's just too bad. But that's the direction we're headed in. And if it wasn't for Trump, it'd be even worse.
Yeah. So that's my soapbox.
So,
what else? Anything new? What are you
it.
working on, Peter?
I'm working on getting a flight to Rome to buy another gun.
I think you'll have a lot more problems, okay, this year. So as we close the show, I want to give credit to our allies in the United Kingdom, specifically their Supreme Court. I didn't even know the United Kingdom had a Supreme Court. But did you see that the decision they made last week that the United Kingdom Supreme Court backs the biological definition of women? They basically came to the conclusion. Now, this is for the entire land, okay? UK, Scotland, Wales, it involves everything. They basically said there's only two sexes. Isn't that what Trump is saying?
That's right.
There's only two sexes, men and women, okay? And they said that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. In all public schools, public government buildings, agencies, that's it. There's two sexes. Now, it's not that they came out against gay, lesbian, queer, transgender. They says, no, you have two sexes. And if people are gay and lesbian, that's fine and everything else. But on all official reports and everything, there's only two sexes, and that's the way it is. It's going to be here. But the interesting thing was, why this reached the UK Supreme Court. It was brought forward by a group called For Women Scotland, which brought a case against the Scottish government, arguing that sex-based protections should only apply to people that are born female, because there were females in in Scotland who felt that they were losing protections under this. I mean, whether it's bathrooms going in and seeing men in there, playing sports, job applications, and everything else. So this went through all the courts, went up to the Supreme Court, and good for them. Good for them that UK stood up for women.
And men and women.
Yeah, men and women, but basically.
But if you read the fine print, it said everybody's from now on has to be named Adam and Eve.
Well, I must have missed that part, but that's at least get a middle name. They have to be Adam and Eve. But I would hope that certain practicality and rationality would somehow find their way onto our shores, and maybe the U.S. Supreme Court will receive a case. I don't know if there's any case like this before them right now.
No, but in the U.S. you have to be named Joe and Mo.
Yeah, Joe and Mo. But you know what? And once again, another story that received very little play in this country from the mainstream media.
You had to search it out.
You had to search it out. Wasn't on the CBS, ABC, NBC newscast. Even Fox News didn't do a big deal about it. They mentioned it and stuff, but it was like a one-day story and everything. No groups in America came out pointing to this and everything. I don't know. Are we down on the British or something? But I thought it was a great ruling, and maybe someone will pick up the torch. But in the UK, if you want to go and live there, if you're a man or a woman, you do have better protections now, I guess, or more protections when it comes to gender. I don't know.
No more gender bending in the UK.
No more gender bending in the UK. So, all right, Peter, anything new? Anything new coming up?
That's about it.
We watch out for?
I think we should watch out for what happens in Rome when President Donald Trump is in attendance to the Pope's funeral.
Yeah.
To see how that's received in Rome and throughout the world.
Yeah. Okay. Well, until next week. Anything? Nothing? Quote of the...
No, but as they say in Rome, ciao, baby.
Ciao.